And welcome to another edition of the Bob Tuskin Show. So glad that you can join us once again, and we have quite the show planned for you tonight. Norway is currently making headlines for turning one of Nikola Tesla's most ambitious dreams into a modern reality. In a groundbreaking project in the city of Trondheim, the country has launched a pilot for wireless electric roads that charge vehicles while they are in motion. Over a century ago, Nikola Tesla envisioned a world wireless system to transmit electricity through the air and ground, aiming to power the globe without cables. While this Wardenclyffe Tower project ultimately failed due to financial and technical hurdles, the core principle, inductive charging, is exactly what Norway is now deploying on a citywide scale. Developed by the Israeli tech firm Electrifying, the system uses copper coils embedded beneath the asphalt. These coils create an electromagnetic field that transfers energy to receivers installed on the undercarriages of vehicles. The current trials involve electric buses. The goal is to allow these buses to run 24/7 without ever needing to stop at a plug-in charging station. Tonight's guest is going to get into this and so much more, including an absolutely fascinating look at water. Tonight we're joined by Charlles Bohdy, a visionary entrepreneur and creator of the NPBOT, say that 5 times fast, Nanoplasmoid Technology. Charlles is at the forefront of redefining how we use water and energy to optimize human health. Tonight, Charlles is going to break down the latest breakthrough in Tesla tech that I just mentioned, specifically focusing on what happened in Norway, but going above and beyond with his unique understanding of not just Tesla tech, but the energy system as a whole. Charlles has developed a next-generation platform that goes beyond the traditional systems. His nanoplasma spa technology is something we're going to tell you about. His work merges science, beauty, and vitality with worldwide installations ranging from Devon, England to Irvine, California. And we're going to talk about some of the major breakthroughs he's had using this nanoplasma water and what is the nanoplasma water. And without further ado, I'm welcome my buddy Charlles Bohdy to the broadcast on the Bob Tuskin Show. What's up, Charlles? How are you?
Hey, I'm flourishing. How you doing today, Ryan?
I could complain. If my name was Ryan, I would tell you that, but it's Bob Tuskin, and I'm glad to have you on. Maybe that was the last podcast you were on. Anywho, so Charlles, what do you make of this story in Norway? I know you've been a lifelong student of Tesla tech. Tell me what you think of it.
Well, I'm not sure what they're really planning on doing. I've had the opportunity to go through the Wardenclyffe bankruptcy notes, and Nikola Tesla was interviewed, deposed actually during the bankruptcy hearing. And, from that, most people believe that he was planning on sending power wirelessly through the air. Couldn't be further from the truth. Upon examining his deposition, it was discovered there was over 100-foot tall or deep into the earth iron core rod that was 8 inches in diameter. So he was actually going to be sending power through the soil. In fact, Tesla thought that Hertz was a fool for trying to send stuff through the air. He believed that the air was a poor conductor, and ideally the best way to do it is to send it straight in through the soil. Even when he demonstrated the world's first remote control, he drove a boat up the Hudson River, and his antenna went directly into the water, and the boat had an antenna that went into the water because the water was a much better conductor, of course, than the air.
That's fascinating. So the world is on a bunch of ley lines, and I think Tesla understood that, if I'm not mistaken, Charlles.
No, I have no opinion about that. Could be.
Yeah, I think it's all connected, and it's interesting that what we know of Tesla has been shifted and changed. When did you start researching Tesla? Tell me a little bit about your deep dive into Tesla, and you've had some experience in the world of energy as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I became a member of Tesla Tech Society, I think maybe 20 years ago, and I've read most of the printed literature related to him, many books about Mr. Tesla. Albert Einstein was asked, "How does it feel to be the smartest man in the world?" And he said, "I don't know. Why don't you ask Mr. Tesla?"
That's right. He did say that.
Yes, sir.
And it's interesting. Elon Musk named the car company Tesla, of course, which is a nod to Nikola Tesla. And I think these days most people don't know the difference. They hear Tesla, they assume it's the car company. They don't teach it in the schools, do they?
No, they don't. And literally everything that we use in our modern world that surrounds us was pretty much the brainchild of Nikola Tesla. He invented he was a proponent of alternating current over direct current, and that is the electricity that runs through our walls. He invented the fluorescent light, which still lights up most of the commercial buildings around the world, even though they're gradually being shifted over to the LEDs. For the last 100 years, fluorescent lights were the go-to low power consuming lighting systems that lit the world. And he built the first hydroelectric power plant, or designed it, for Niagara Falls, and that's still operating today. And he patented the first induction motor for alternating current. And as a matter of fact, I visited the Smithsonian Institution 20 some years ago, and there was the world's first patented electric motor, and it had Tesla's patent number written right on it. And then right next to it is a bust of Thomas Alva Edison, with no credit being given to Nikola Tesla. And even in the book of the greatest 100 minds of the 20th century that was published by the Smithsonian Institution, curiously, they left Nikola Tesla out. Yet everything we do today, the wireless transmission of information, that was all Tesla. When you lay your phone down on a inductive charging pad where there's no cord attached to it, that inductive charging mechanism is pure Tesla. So, virtually everything that we have in the world of technology today has some roots in Tesla. He developed commercial X-ray machines for physiology. He developed ozone equipment for treating water and treating the human physiology. The man was a veritable fountain of ideas and technologies.
He truly was. And you mentioned Edison. Tesla had quite the, I don't know if you could call it a rivalry, but quite the relationship with Thomas Edison, didn't he?
Well, Nikola Tesla was a fan of Thomas Edison. He came over from Croatia, and he worked for Edison for some time. The issue was really more of an ego issue with Edison, where Edison felt threatened by Tesla's true brilliance. And eventually that ended up in a parting of ways. And over the course of many years, Edison went around the country electrocuting, elephants and pets and farm animals to prove that his direct current system was far safer than Tesla's alternating current. But, the rivalry was undeserved. Tesla was a fan of Mr. Edison, and I think would have worked there happily for the rest of his life if he'd been given credit and compensation.
Absolutely. It's funny. Somebody showed this to me, and I take it with a grain of salt. Some people don't believe they look alike. But if you take a picture of young Thomas Edison and you hold it side by side to Elon Musk, the two look quite similar. Just saying. Have you ever seen that, Charles?
Sure have not. No.
It's
Mr. Edison,
it's interesting.
He was born minutes away from my childhood home. I visited his childhood home, and he was a true workaholic. He was a brilliant guy in his own right, but what Edison was really good at was understanding markets and need, and he was really good at taking technologies and converting them into viable market-based products. And Tesla was always thinking about the new next best thing, and he wasn't really concerned with the commercialization aspects, and that that really served to his detriment over the course of his life. He was dependent on the wealth of others to keep
Right.
him working on new technologies.
Yeah, and that's one of the big threats. The powers that shouldn't be, they can buy innovative technology and then sit on it. I think there's probably a ton of examples out there of this sort of strategy. And a lot of people associate the name Nikola Tesla with free energy or an over unity energy supply, sort of the holy grail of taking things to the next level. Have you given it any thought? Do you think over unity is out there? It violates the laws of thermodynamics, but yet a lot of people believe that there may be technology that exists on the planet today along those lines. What is your thought on that?
I think we've been misled about a variety of topics, and I'm not going to speak to over unity or free energy technologies at length because that's not my area of research. But I can tell you that they do the definition of work involves moving something across an inclined plane. They'll tell you there is no such thing as over unity, yet they will tell you that an electron continues to spin around the center of the atom, the proton or the neutron, indefinitely with no additional power source. So that seems to defy one of Newton's laws. They had to create a fictitious strong nuclear force to make the math work when they observed that.
Right.
You can have something like a refrigerator magnet stuck on your refrigerator for 20 years holding physical weight. No energy input has been granted, yet it's still sitting there doing work, holding weight opposed to the quote unquote force of gravity. So I think there are a lot of things that we've been told that don't exist. For example, the patent office won't allow you to patent a perpetual motion machine. Yet scientists at MIT built a series of nitinol devices that deal with the memory function of nickel titanium alloy, nitinol. And they've been continuously running for over a decade with no energy input. So I think it's more about how you structure devices rather than violating, Newton's quote unquote laws. It's really about realizing that we live in an open source universe full of abundance, as opposed to relying in the, powers that shouldn't be scarcity mindset mentality that they've allowed to permeate our science and our institutions. And not only that, if you try to patent something that may challenge those norms, we have the National
Right.
Security Patent Act that allows them to come in, put the patent under national security wraps, and even impress the inventor into service, unpaid service for the government. So I think there are some things that we really need to step back and take a look at and reassess how to do things in a more productive, free, and open way that would be something that was in accordance with the will of our forefathers as opposed to the way that it
Mhm.
works today.
Yeah, I love all those things that you mentioned. Abundance is such a important part of my work. And of course, in my talk at the Free Your Mind conference that I gave titled Scarcity-Based Mind Control and the Liberation of the Mind, Body, and Spirit, we talk a bit about what we ought to see in our world today as far as having an abundance of technology to be for the betterment of man and not have it suppressed and not have it used in evil ways. You touch on a lot of what I talk about in the latter part of that lecture. And one of the major themes to your research and your work is health. And if we have an abundance of good health, then we're already a step above and beyond what the powers that shouldn't be, as I like to call them, want us to be, which is sick, brainwashed, not intelligent, not learning. And we're going to get into that because you're an inventor and you've invented an incredible device and technology that has transformed water in a way that's doing an amazing amount of good for people. And I want to do a deep dive into that because water fascinates me. I want to learn more about what is water, what is structured water. I want to talk about all of these things and more. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the idea that information now is so abundant on the internet, but it's a double-edged sword, because although it's abundant, although people have access to more information than ever before, there's so much fluff out there that it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And I know you're fond of waking people up and educating them and employing a true education. Tell me a little bit about how important education is to you and your family, and how you see the powers that shouldn't be occulting certain things from the masses, and how we can get beyond that. You froze up. You still there? Uh-oh. I think we may have lost
No,
Charles.
I'm right here. I'm
Oh,
right
you're
here.
back.
I don't know.
Okay.
Apologize. I'm limited to Elon Musk-based internet here.
The irony. So anyways, I just wanted to touch on education and learning, and I see a vast library, and I know how important it is to you and your family. So I wanted to give you a moment just to talk about a real education and what sort of information you'd like to see proliferated in our world today.
Well, when it comes to education, I think the most important thing is following a different model, an older model they call the classical education method. It was developed by the Greeks originally, and it focused on grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and in that order, where you lay the groundwork in grammar and then teach the basics of logic, and eventually culminate in learning the art of rhetoric. And principally, the most important thing we can teach our children is how to understand the logical fallacies. They all need to be memorized and learned, because when we understand how to ask good questions, and we know what the logical fallacies are, we can realize when we're tempted to be when people are attempting to manipulate us and to get us to believe fictions. And by simply understanding what the logical fallacies are, how they're employed, it eliminates the ability of people to become sheeple and to be easily manipulated by 30-second sound bites and taken out of context headlines proliferated by the yellow journalism that's so common today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we talked about the trivium on last week's broadcast as well. It's a reoccurring theme because I see it as a prerequisite to deciphering what truth is out there or not out there, for that matter. And you can apply it to so many things. You can apply it to current events, or if you're like me and you're tired of getting hung up on this flavor or that flavor of whatever the newest current event is, you can apply it towards more deep research on things like health or solution-oriented things that you and I are both passionate about, Charles. And one of the things that you're most passionate about, without further ado, is health. You've done a lot of research into alternative cures, if you will. Am I allowed to use the C word, Charles? Is that taboo?
I would never. I don't believe in curing anything.
Okay.
No.
Why not? Why don't we use the C word? Is it just to appease the bureaucrats, or?
No, I mean, Benjamin Franklin said it best when he said, "The body heals itself, the physician collects the fee." So we are a body comprised of soul, spirit, and physical matter, and we're really a grouping of cells, and not all of our cells are even native to us. We have bacteria colonies and fungal colonies and other things that comprise the corpus that we call our human body, and it is a self-organizing corpus. So the intelligence is in the cells in the body, written into the DNA, and then written into the software that they call junk DNA, or the operating system that runs the cells. So, to use the term cure implies that an outside force is performing some magical voodoo to effect a change or a cure. And that brings you to the root word of what we call modern medicine today, which is pharmacology. And that the root word is Greek. It's called pharmakia, and it really means sorcery, or in some interpretations, black magic. So rather than relying on sorcery, it's better to create the conditions and provide the body with the building blocks so that it can self-organize in a way that it makes it thrive and be healthy. And then you have to worry about curing things.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the body's made up of a ton of different things, but it's predominantly water, is it not?
Well, by molecular weight, yeah, up to 90 some percent. They say the body's 70% water, and that may be true, but by molecular weight, it's a lot more than that.
What are the implications of that?
Well, water is an anomalous thing. It's according to Professor Bill Tiller of Stanford, who was the former dean of material sciences there, it's a cage-like molecule capable of storing frequencies and information. And so water is a living liquid crystal, and it is, powerfully affected by information. It has a memory, and it even has a life cycle. Greats like Victor Schauberger said that it goes through a life cycle process. So when it's born through the process of evaporation condensation, it comes out as immature water, which would be its birth, or distilled water would be a form of immature water. But it's hungry for memory. It's hungry for information. It's looking to be filled. And so as water travels through the air, and then it travels through soil and through feeder streams, and it vortexes around rocks and capillaries and runs through the earth, it picks up minerals, it picks up memory, and it picks up information along the way. And eventually, when it gets to its final mature stage, we get things like levitating springs that spring up from the earth. And that water is, what we would consider ideal water, like literal mountain spring water that continues to rise from the earth without pumping.
Right. Yeah, that spring water is abundant in my neck of the woods, and it's one of the reasons why I've stayed in this area. It's absolutely amazing how well I feel after grounding in the springs. We're lucky to have beautiful springs here, and I go take a swim, and they're 72 degrees year round. Please don't move to Florida, folks. You wouldn't like it. It's horrible, but they're crystal clear and they're beautiful. And afterwards, I do feel a sense of well-being. Is there a grounding effect in swimming in either the springs or the ocean or something along those lines?
Well, I mean, those springs are also loaded with minerals, and they've got all sorts of benefits to the body. And your skin, of course, is the endothelial glycocalyx. A subcomponent of it is the body's largest organ. So you can take in more minerals through your skin more rapidly than you can through your gut. So soaking,
transdermally.
and that's right, transdermally.
And that's why your showers are really important. You don't want your showers to, or your baths, and we'll talk about your tubs, but you don't want to soak up all the chlorine and fluoride and all of these dangerous things in our water supply.
Like, Bill Gates says the next generation of vaccines are going to be delivered transdermally through the skin. And that's because they realize the power of the skin to accept information or accept medicines, or in some cases, we might consider them pharmaceuticals, depending on your viewpoint. But the body is really susceptible when you're in a shower state, especially. And if you're living in a municipality where they're putting massive amounts of chlorine in water that people don't realize just how disgusting our modern water treatment plants are, but they have these things called grabbers, and their job is to grab chunks of toilet paper and wet wipes and disgusting things that got flushed down the toilet that won't dissolve naturally. So they have this little monster looking machine called the grabber that pulls this stuff up and bails it. And then they just start injecting it in a series of settlement ponds, and they dope it with chlorine at really, really high concentrations. As a matter of fact, the water that makes it back into our taps after running through the whole modern quote unquote processing system, has 4 times the level of chlorine on average that's considered safe to swim. So when you're taking a shower with tap water, you're getting more chlorine in the air. It's actually less safe to shower than it is to smoke cigarettes. So
Really?
You get far more lung damage from showering than you'd get from actually, doing what my British friends say, lighting up a fag after dinner. It's way more toxic to shower in chlorinated water than it is to even smoke tobacco products.
Yeah. They say sitting is the new smoking. Perhaps they should be saying showering is the new smoking.
It's worse.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely worse.
That's wild. And you were talking about the water treatment facilities, and I just watched a piece from 60 Minutes. Don't get me wrong, that's not my favorite source of information, but they were talking about how China had access to the computer systems to over 200 small towns throughout the United States, water treatment facilities.
That's
it's
right.
interesting. Yeah.
Definitely
Those
right.
that control the water control, perhaps.
Well, and the thing is, because water is a cage-like molecule capable of storing frequencies and information, we end up, urinating and flushing down the toilets and in our sinks, medicines, SSRIs, allergy medication, Viagra, all sorts of these pharmaceutical companies' products. And what people don't realize is that they synthesize those chemicals from oil. So the quote unquote pharmaceutical drugs are made from petrochemical distillates. So you've got this, toxic chemical distillate that is in the water that's coming from these drugs. And then you have the actual effects, that many of which still remain, and it's retained by the water as memory. So even if you even if you kill the bacteria with chlorine and you filter out the biggest, amounts of the chemicals, you still are leaving the memory of those toxins, bacteria, and pathogens in the water itself, even the memory of the petrochemicals. So there was a physicist in Germany that did an experiment 10 years or so ago where they took contaminated water samples, they filtered it out to ultra pure pharmaceutical grade. That means injectable. Right. And he was able to take that water, run it through his machine, and correctly identify all the pathogens that had been removed and all the contaminants simply from the memory that was left behind, or the energy signatures left behind in the water. And was not given a list of the contaminants ahead of time, but yet his machine correctly identified this. So
that's insane. Now I will say that it's still better to do something with your water, though. I mean, for those out there who don't have access to the sorts of technology that you've helped innovate, please do something. I mean, use a Berkey with a fluoride filter. Use something, correct?
Well, sure. It's better to filter water than not filter water.
Sure. So what are the best options for those that want to figure out how to deal with their water supply?
Best options would be to purchase an Energize living water system. But what I think the thing that's missed, most often is the information component. So, water isn't this simple molecule H2O that we've been taught. And using porosity filtration, which is basically a strainer to strain out the impurities, leaves behind the memory. And so any good system really needs to deal with the memory. There are a lot of people, the go-to standard in homes has become reverse osmosis. Well, reverse osmosis water is dead. First of all, it really isn't a filtration technology.
Right.
It's a concentration technology. So it takes half of the water and it concentrates the toxins from one half into the other half, and that goes down the drain in a house. If you're in the ocean and you're using an RO system, it goes back into the ocean as brine, and it's been proven to have terrible environmental impacts because it's that water that's injected back into the ocean has doubled the salinity of the water that was purified for drinking. So, but reverse osmosis strips the minerals out of water. And our bodies need a minimum of 72 trace elements to get full genetic expression. And our soils have been stripped for over 100 years. We're only putting 3 minerals back on the soil. And so it becomes vital to make sure we're getting the minerals and the things that we need. Well, when you're taking RO water, you're stripping all the minerals out. It becomes dead. As a matter of fact, they did some early installations in large commercial greenhouses of RO systems, and they found that the plants were more sickly even after being fed this RO water, and they had a tremendous problem with mold, which you don't get out of standard traditional filtration over the RO filtration. But the minerals become really vital, and you need the minerals to affect life-giving properties into water. So the system that I developed, really relies on a different type of filter technology. And I'm not the inventor of the filter. A good friend of mine developed it for medical practices, typically in-house plastic surgeons and oral surgeons that need irrigation water for when they're doing surgery. And they developed a multi-layer pleated filter system that uses electrical charge rather than porosity filtration to selectively remove pathogens. We can take out viruses to 7 nines, that's 99.9999999%, bacteria to 10 nines, so 99.10, 10 nines afterwards.
99999
Yeah. And each 9 is a logarithmic scale, so it's 10 times more than the 9 before that. So when you get to 10 nines purification, that's about as pure as we're capable of getting. And so, but we're leaving, we're taking out the forever chemicals like X and PFAS and fluoride.
Sure.
We're taking out bad minerals like, radium and cadmium and uranium. But we're leaving, we're leaving calcium, we're leaving magnesium, we're leaving trace cobalt and copper, the minerals that our body needs to thrive and survive. And rather than using salt, we use a magnetic field to begin to soften the water and drop the calcium to aragonite. And then we begin vortexing that water past catalyst discs. So the vortexing past the catalyst disc does 2 things. The vortexing begins to erase the memory component of the water. It's sort of like rewriting the hard drive to a blank disk. It's like formatting the disk. The catalysts that we're running it past drop up to 85% of the calcium to aragonite, which is the crystallized version of calcium. Still able to be used by your body, but it doesn't clog the sides of your pipes, and it won't clog the elements in your water heater and your water tanks. So it makes it a softer water without having to use ion exchange or salt systems that make the water.
And there's a lot of hard water,
gross.
right? And a lot of hard water requires those sorts of systems, but this addresses that. I want to do a deeper dive
But then the next thing, and the last thing, the most important part of the system is the thing that's left out by virtually all water filter companies. And that is to put the memory of life back in the water.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Are you programming the water with certain emotions? We talk about Dr. Emoto and what he saw when he looked at water in a certain way. Are you able to put certain frequencies and certain love and care and all these cool things back and reprogram the water?
Speaking of Emoto,
Okay.
And then there's another German scientist named Bernd Kropf, and Emoto used to take water and expose it to frequencies and information. He exposed it to words, he exposed it to microwaves, he exposed it to different types of music, even different types of prayer. And then he would freeze the water and he would photograph the water crystals as they formed in the freezer. But he was given a lot of criticism by certain of his peers that claimed that he cherry picked the photographs of the crystals that he wanted to represent his beliefs. Now, I don't think that that's true. I've met several people that work directly with Emoto for years and years who say that's absolutely a fantasy. But the German scientist, Mr. Kropf, he was a physicist, and he is a physicist, and he wrote a book called The World in a Drop. So he applied rigorous scientific method to studying, instead of water crystals, dried water droplets. And he was able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt all of the things that Emoto had seen. He was able to see in dried water droplets using his methodology. And I have that book behind me on the shelf right here, along with a couple of Emoto's books. But Bernd Kropf did an amazing job of, eliminating the skeptics by applying rigid scientific method testing. And we could talk about how the scientific method is flawed in and of itself, because it fails to take into account the intention of the observer, and that's something that quantum physics has been delving
quantum physics.
into.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating conversation. We're going to do a deeper dive into consciousness and the observer and this reality with this new reincarnation of the Bob Tuskin show. So all great topics, but back to your technology and your innovation. So just to recap,
imprinting the energy of life back into the water is what we were talking about. And so
tell me.
We have developed a technique that uses piezoelectric. So as the water is running through our structuring device, it is creating passive electricity through the piezoelectric effect. And it's creating, millions of negative ions as the water travels through, and that provides the power source for us to then imprint the memory of life and minerals back into the water. So we call it a biofield imprinting device, and it's proprietary technology, but it literally imprints the energy of life and living systems back into the water. We've got studies that were done as far away as India, and recent studies that are done on our device by scientists in Czechoslovakia. They've done some work with live blood. They've done work with plants. And, plants are not subject to the placebo effect, at least as far as we know. Yet we've seen 20% to 250% yield increases in everything from row crops to fruits and vegetables. So if the plant's growing 20% more yield, that it's doing something.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a major threat. The powers that shouldn't be don't want to see more food grown in more efficient ways, unfortunately. We know that during the Great Depression, for the first time ever in human history, mechanical energy surpassed human labor, allowing us to produce with the resources, particularly in North America, more food than ever before. But rather than proliferate that abundance, they paid farmers to destroy crops, with dairy farmers pouring milk down the drain and farmers deliberately not growing plants. And still to this day, farmers are paid billions of dollars to not grow, and subsidies from the government. So we know it's not a matter of the potential for abundance. It's a matter of the powers that shouldn't be limiting that abundance.
Well, if you're talking about farms, let's talk about the even bigger scandal, which is the fact that every farmer goes into debt every spring to buy the seed that they're going to put on the soil to grow the crops.
The Monsanto seeds?
I'm not picking on any particular, death-oriented cult companies, but
right, you don't want to do that.
The Bible has a very simple method. It says to keep back 10% of your seed to plant next year's crops. And so the Creator that I believe created our universe built in more seeds than we can possibly consume, so that every year, by saving 10%, we have enough to plant next year's crops. But farmers don't do this anymore. They go to the bank every spring to take out seed loans, and they start the year under the gun of the heavy gun of debt, a gun held straight to their temples. And if they have a bad year where something fails, they can go under because of this massive debt, where simple seed saving would eliminate all of that. They
Sure.
got farmers into this in the Great Depression during the 1930s, and it's become so standard that modern farmers have forgotten how to seed save.
The
And then
debtor is slave to the lender, and in this case, the debtor is a slave to genetically modified seeds, for instance, where they can't even seed save if they wanted to. They can choose the seeds that come from the plants that had the strongest yield, and they can't go and produce that particular seed, because one of the things that happens when you seed save is that the next generation of plants grow even better because of perhaps epigenetic memory that seed carries, and is more adapt to the growing location and the growing conditions of that area. So it's fascinating that the powers that shouldn't be have tried to get us away from this sort of abundance and common sense.
Yeah, as I said at the outset, I believe we live in an abundant universe, and scarcity is artificial. So, I'm not picking on
Yeah.
the farmers. I'm actually lamenting the fact that they're so indoctrinated that they've come to believe that the only way to farm is to take out the loan. And it came during the
wild.
bankruptcy in 1933, and they've gotten them, addicted to the teat of the lender. And the Bible says that the borrower is servant to the lender. It says the lender is the head and the borrower is the tail. And I think that the key to freedom in many levels is to throw off the shackles of debt slavery, which is the new invisible slavery.
Sure.
Not race-based, but financially constrictions that are created
Right.
through being servants to lenders.
Well, what a wonderful digression, but let's get back to your water technology, because I want people to understand some of the results people have had in bathing in it, because you mentioned how important transdermally water is to the human body. And I want to talk a little bit from a layman's, if you could break it down for the layman, what is nanoplasmoid technology? Say that 5 times fast, folks. What is nanoplasmoid technology? How did you come across this, and what uses have you found for this amazing technology?
Well, that is a segue from the water filter. That's a different technology. And rather than calling myself an inventor, I'm more of a product developer and a steward to the great ideas that the Creator gives me. In the book of Proverbs, it says that God will give you creative ideas and witty inventions. But what a nanoplasmoid is something I stumbled across in working on developing an improvement to electrolytic oxygenation of water. And we were working with a technology that used electricity to split water into its component parts. And in so doing, create trillions of negative ions. And I realized that these gases that were being liberated from the water were mostly escaping atmospherically. But we'd seen great effects. I was working on a project originally for poultry using the water, and we found we could virtually eliminate the pathogen-based effects of poultry in modern concentrated animal feeding operations. So these 100 million bird barns where they lose 15% of every flock in, flock out, to dead birds because it's unnatural to grow 1 million birds in a barn. We were able to virtually eliminate that by giving them this electrolytically oxidized water.
Real quick, Charles, the irony I have to interject. We'll be talking about flock cameras during the next hour with our guest, Jeff Gray, who will be talking about a different kind of flock. I own chickens and I love my chickens, but ironically, we'll be talking about them spying on us with the flock cameras in the next hour with First Amendment constitutional activist Jeffrey Gray. So stay tuned for that, folks, because they're watching us. Big Brother is always watching us. Anyways, I digress, but I just had to comment on that. But go ahead. Nanoplasmoid. How do you say it? Nanoplasmoid? Is that
Call it
that right?
nanoplasma water, or the
Okay.
things that are being generated in the water we call plasmoids. That's a physics principle. Charged gases and charged electricity can manifest as something called the fourth phase of matter is called plasma, and it can manifest as a spherical or toroidal form, and it self-organizes into those forms. So as I was looking at how to increase the efficacy of capturing the gases that were being generated through the process of electrolysis and generating these, negative ions, I started looking to different types of technology to strip the gases and reintroduce them into the water. And in 2014 or 15, I went to a seminar where I saw a Japanese man give a lecture on nanobubbles. And I'd never heard of a nanobubble, but traditional bubble formation is called coalescence. So smaller bubbles are attracted to other smaller bubbles, and they form larger and larger bubbles till they get big enough to rise to the surface of the water and break. And when you get water bubbles in water under 100 nanometers, something magical happens. In physics, it's called a zeta potential shift. But essentially, the bubble develops a net negative electrical charge, and the van der Waals forces on the inside and the outside of the bubble increase, and the bubble becomes super strong. But there's another effect. When all bubbles have the same negative charge, they can no longer come together in the process of coalescence, which normal bubbles follow. They actually are repelled from one another like same pole magnets. And so in that repelling force, it allows the bubbles to stay in solution. I've kept bubbles in solution for up to 6 years in a bottle, from
Wow.
one application. And when we generate our nanobubbles, we're using a series of technologies. We're manipulating the electrical fields themselves. That's my most recent patent, is manipulating electrical fields when generating nanobubbles or nanoplasmoids. And it allows for these bubbles to be metastable, where many nanobubbles will only last in water for months. We can do it for years and years.
So you could potentially bottle this water and sell it on the shelves to people to drink?
Absolutely, and it has some profound effects, although I can't make any claims. There are 1,800 or more peer-reviewed studies showing the crazy beneficial effects of different gases on human physiology. So the effect of the plasma inside the bubble forming a toroid, which is what it does. A toroid, for layman, is just a donut shape. But what happens when these bubbles are formed and they become metastable, it has all sorts of physiological effects. And just in the last 5 years, Cambridge University in England published a study called the nano architecture of the cell. And what they discovered is that our bodies are nanobubble generators. So when we inspire,
go ahead. Yeah, that's fascinating.
When we breathe in at the alveoli interface in our lung, when we were kids, they taught us, you breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide.
Sure.
And I thought this was well-settled science. So, I'm reading this Cambridge paper, and the very first thing they said is the least understood aspect of human physiology is what happens at that alveoli, how the oxygen goes in and the carbon dioxide comes out. And they discovered that in the nano architecture of the cell, we're generating O2 and N2 nanobubbles, so oxygen and nitrogen nanobubbles. And then at expiration, when we breathe out, we're generating CO2 nanobubbles that are generated through interstitial foams. and they line the lowest level of our skin, the endothelial glycocalyx, the body's largest organ we referred to just a little bit ago. So our body uses and depends on nanobubbles for all sorts of transport mechanisms, for redox signaling, for communication. And what we discovered is that when you either imbibe them or drink them, or even better, when you're surrounded by them, soaking in a fluid-filled tub or a bathtub, your body now has access to trillions of times more nanobubbles or nanoplasma than it would generate on its own naturally. And it has no way of knowing that these bubbles are exogenously generated. As far as it knows, it generated them, and it just puts them to work. And as I mentioned, I don't believe in curing anything. My technology does nothing to cure. But what it does is it provides conditions that allows that self-organizing effect of the body to begin structural repair.
So it taps into the body's natural mechanism to heal itself, to deal with these sorts of toxins.
Correct.
Interesting. And when people soak in this or drink this water, break down for me what happens and give me some of the results of this
one thing that happens,
exposure.
When you're old or when you're in a disease state, your blood platelets tend to clump together.
They clump together, right?
And when you've got more than 2 platelets clumped together, they won't go through the body's finest capillary. You see, the size of the platelet and the size of the capillary are virtually the same size. I mean, it's so closely in diameter, it's a wonder that the platelet can even move through. So when you have 2 together, they will no longer go through the capillary. Well, that's what happens in diabetic people with diabetic ulcers. Their blood becomes thick and clumping, and now you can't get the oxygen carried by the platelet into the deepest, most hypoxic tissue. And it's what they call death by inches, where they start by chopping off the big toe and then the other toes and then half of the foot and then the whole foot to the ankle and up to the knee until eventually they end up in the grave.
So the nanoplasmoids help to penetrate in a way that
when you take oxygen in its charged state, what happens when it goes into the platelet is the platelet retains the charge. And so now all of a sudden these blood platelets that are clumped together, we can watch in real time separate because the negative charge prevents them from clumping. And so, I call my technology NPBOT, which is nanoplasma balneo-oxygen therapy. It's a play on the HBOT or hyperbaric oxygen therapy. But what it's really allowing the body to do is to get oxygen to the deepest, most hypoxic tissue. One of those mechanisms is charge. Another one is actually the hydrogen. So people don't realize the powerful effect that hydrogen has in the body. As the lightest element and in the most powerful antioxidant, it's also incredibly capable of tissue inflammation reduction. So when your body is in an inflamed state, and in all disease states, virtually, there's some level of inflammation. The inflammation can seal off the intracellular oxygen pathways. So when you're soaking in molecular hydrogen or breathing molecular hydrogen, many of the studies show, you're able to cause this massive anti-inflammatory effect. We see people that are soaking in our tubs, they get out and they report conditions where their pain seems to have disappeared and it stays gone for a long time from a simple soak, which sounds implausible, but it happens. And what that does is it opens up those intracellular oxygen pathways and it allows us to get oxygen delivery to the deepest, most hypoxic tissue, far more than you can get out of a simple hyperbaric chamber, which relies on just oxygen and pressure. And it's actually the secondary gas, hydrogen gas, even for the mitochondrial function. For oxygen to go into the mitochondria, there has to be a certain amount of molecular hydrogen on the cell membrane or the oxygen can't be used.
And for those that are forgetting, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's that the essence of the
It's
foundation of
where all
health?
of our energy is made at the cellular
Right.
level. It's the ATP cycle. Cancer cells are cells where that mitochondrial ATP function has been hijacked into one of fermentation.
Exactly.
Um, so, when we're dealing with correcting the ATP cycle, it can have many downstream cascade of effects. And again, this is all due to the body's self organizing. It has nothing to do with my fluid. It has everything to do with the body being put into a state where it can heal itself. Like Ben Franklin said, the
It's a
physician
beautiful thing.
collects the fee, the body heals itself.
That's an amazing take on this, and I think that's one that the pharmaceutical complex would not like to hear, but nonetheless, it's true. And
And this water
it's
also becomes structured. So the water inside
yeah.
the
What does that
cells.
mean? What does structured water mean? Well, I hear that term a lot. I think often people
It,
listening
it's
do as well. What does that mean?
it's a terrible misnomer that can mean a bunch of different things depending on the people that are using the term. But in practical terms, what I'll say is that Dr. Gilbert Ling did a bunch of research on intracellular water. And he discovered that the water inside the cells is substantially different from typical water. That work was then carried on by Professor Gerald Pollack, who proved that water that passes through a series of tubules or microtubules um, develops a different structure. It becomes denser, and he called it easy water, or the fourth phase of water. But it is water that more closely resembles the water inside the cells than the water outside the cells. And so, that's another benefit of soaking in a bathtub full of this structured type water
Right.
is you're able to drag the gases into places where the capillaries won't go. So joint capsules and cartilage and other tissues that aren't supplied by the blood itself end up being able to have this payload of gases delivered through the mechanism of hydration. So for certain conditions, getting the gases there is very difficult because there's no capillary blood flow. But you can't hide from the mechanism of hydration. We find
And you've
people that get in the tub, they may, in the first time they get in, they'll become pruny in 5 minutes, like they were soaking in a regular bathtub for an hour. It's because they're so chronically dehydrated that when they start taking in this water that's similar to cellular water, they get overwhelmed. By the second or third time, it may take 20 minutes. By their fifth soak, they could be in the tub for an hour and they don't get pruny anymore. And the reason is they finally become truly hydrated. In some cases, maybe the first time since they left the womb, the amniotic fluid.
That's incredible. And you've actually looked at people's blood under a microscope. What do they call that when you look at blood in
A
live
dark
time?
field microscopy, yeah.
Yeah, and you've seen almost instantaneous differences in the way the blood structure looks, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
within minutes, yes.
It's fascinating stuff. Now, these tubs, utilizing your nanoplasmoid technology, this isn't something that people can get yet, is it? This isn't available to the general
Oh
public, is
yeah, it
it?
is. We have more tubs in wealthy
Really?
people's homes than we have in clinics. Although we have quite a few people that are putting them in biohacking clinics, medical facilities, and other
Really?
gyms and things like that. Matter of fact, we're
So,
just coming out with a new underwater treadmill that has the nanoplasma
well,
water
that's cool.
system, so you can work out in these gases.
That's cool.
We
So,
had a
but this is not just for the elite, though. What's your vision? You want to see this where people can go to their neighborhood holistic practitioner or whomever and soak in the tubs and have access to this water? Is that your vision?
Well, sure. I'd like it to be on every shelf for people to be able to drink.
Yeah, that'd be great. and maybe an at-home unit that people can start to install. Those reverse osmosis systems aren't cheap, and they don't do much, as we discussed earlier. All right, so this spa technology is out there. It's in a number of places already, and people can get access to this. So if they have a holistic health practice, or they want to recommend it to their local biohacking community, this is something that people can get right now as we speak.
Yeah, nanohydrotherapy.com is a website. The
Okay.
water filters are at energizelivingwater.com. And
All
if
right,
you want to
or
put
they can just reach out to me. I'll put them in touch with you.
say you can put in Bob Tuskin, and we'll give you some kind of a good discount on anything.
No, don't give them a discount. Don't give them a discount. We gotta.
Come on, I like you too much to not do that.
All right. Well, contact me if you want to get in touch with my buddy Charles here. As you can tell, he's a wealth of information, and this water stuff is absolutely fascinating. The Bob Tuskin Show at gmail.com is my email. Of course, you can find me on all of the social media platforms, Bob Tuskin. Charles, we're going to have to do this again. Any final thoughts before we let you go? It's been a fascinating look at a number of different things, but I'm curious to hear any final thoughts you might have, and what maybe we can cover next time.
A real big contamination problem for people, and that's their swimming pool. So because I do live here in Florida, there are so many pool homes, and most people are swimming in a toxic soup, which is also really, really harmful. Your swimming pool might look crystal clear and beautiful, but it's hiding hidden toxic chemicals, chloramines, trihalomethanes, disinfection byproducts, and chlorine itself. And we developed a way to make your swimming pool chemical free as well. So all of these things are things we could talk about anytime you'd like.
Awesome. We'll do it again, Charles. It's been fascinating. Thanks for coming on the Bob Tuskin Show.
Thank you. You have a blessed day.
Take care, buddy. All right. That was Charlles Bohdy, and what a great wealth of information he has. I'm lucky to call him a friend and have him nearby, and we've collaborated a lot behind the scenes on a number of projects, and look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Okay, without further ado, let me start to get into our next guest. Our next guest on the Bob Tuskin Show is the legend, Jeff Gray. Honor Your Oath, the YouTube channel. He's often been described as the OG of First Amendment auditing. But more importantly, he is a civil rights investigator, testing whether public officials truly honor their oath or whether or not they're going to violate his rights. And he's documented this on a number of different occasions. Most recently, Jeff posted on his YouTube channel, Honor Your Oath, a video of him confronting a flock camera installer, and he, like myself, is outraged with the flock cameras. So in addition to talking about the world of First Amendment auditings, what we like, what we don't like, where it's headed, what it's really accomplished over the many years that he's been doing it, we're going to talk about something that's topical, which is the flock camera systems. 1984, George Orwell told us we lived in a world where our thoughts were constantly being monitored by Big Brother. We've known for some time since 9/11 and the Patriot Act that privacy is not what it used to be. And although you have no expectation of privacy going out in public, these flock cameras are leading to false convictions, false arrest. They're leading to a whole cornucopia of issues, and they're being abused in so many different ways. The flock safety uses AI-powered cameras to create vehicle fingerprints, capturing license plates, cars, makes and model, color, unique features like the roof racks. These cameras, networked across thousands of cities, are allowing law enforcement to track vehicles in real time. Unlike traditional CCTV, Flock creates a searchable database of innocent people's movements. Activists argue this enables the government to reconstruct a person's private life, visit doctors, churches, or protests without a warrant. While sold as a tool for violent crime, the system is increasingly using is increasingly used for low-level offenses, immigration enforcement, or tracking individuals seeking health care in restrictive states. And without further ado, I want to bring on my good friend and colleague, Jeff Gray, to the Bob Tuskin Show. Jeff, how are you, my friend?
I'm on the radio, baby. Right when we go
You
live,
sure
you start
are.
calling my name. I'm sorry, Bob.
Right when you came on, I love that. If it wasn't your wife or kids, it would have been mine. It's always how it goes.
I
What
was
a
like,
great
as soon as you
introduction.
say, "Here's Jeff Gray," hey Jeff.
I love it, my friend. I love it.
Yeah,
Jeff, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry about my avatar. I don't know how to get it the right way there.
It doesn't matter. I have a lovely little picture of us that I made before the show so people can see your beautiful face here. And you're often behind the camera with your First Amendment audits, but these days you've been more commonly in front of the camera with a cardboard sign that says, "God bless the homeless veterans." And before we get into flock cameras, and we'll do a deep dive into that, tell me about how that came about, because that's become your signature. Not only freedom of speech, but freedom of religion, mentioning God, and freedom of assembly, holding a sign, and standing up for a cause you believe in and you actually actively contribute to.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to let everybody know that's listening to us that Bob and I go pretty far back. I don't know if we've ever met in person, but we've known each other over the phone and over the internet for quite a long time. You worked for Photography is Not a Crime with Penac, didn't you? Didn't you write a couple of stories about me with Penac?
I did. I wrote articles back in the day, and we helped get the word out. And way back when it was just this emerging passion of yours, we were exposing the fact that officials didn't like to be recorded, and it sure has evolved since then. Now these First Amendment audits have become very popular on the internet.
Yeah, there's I don't even know how many there are out there now, of all different styles and varieties, and I think overall that's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing.
I think so as well. So, when did you start holding up the cardboard sign that you describe as a mirror, showing what's in people's heart, as you like to say?
Yeah, the the cardboard sign that has God bless homeless veterans written on it, and I like to refer to it also as my magic cardboard mirror, which reflects what's in people's hearts. Just holding it up to society. I started that about 5 years ago, and I was inspired. I met a friend of mine. A little before that, when we know each other a little bit longer. His name is Tracy Jabot. We actually met at a stringer. I was there doing a stringer type of news media coverage of a homeless um, fundraiser. I think that was going on. Tracy Jabot was there, and he saw me and he knew who I was from my YouTube channel, and he came up and told me that my videos on my YouTube channel have helped him stand up for his rights, because when he was trying to feed the homeless in downtown Jacksonville and Jacksonville, Florida Beach, he was being harassed by the cops and threatened with arrest just for feeding the homeless, which we've seen a lot of that around
Yeah.
the United States. And he said through watching my videos that he learned how to stand up for himself, assert his rights, get public records and things like that. And we struck up a friendship from there. And that he does something called Jack's Beach Brothers Keeper, where he goes out and feeds the homeless on weekends. And also there's a organization that's called the Beaches Homeless Coalition, and this all
Okay.
takes place out on Jacksonville Beach. And we volunteer with that, and they put on comfort night shelters is what they call them, because during the summertime is Northeast Florida doesn't get that cold that often, but so during the summer and when it's not cold, they put on what they call comfort night shelters. And then just recently, there's a couple times this year already in 2026, we've done uh, 6 nights of cold night shelters that we've volunteered
Yeah.
for. So it's just kind of developed from there. And, just seeing the way that the homeless are treated and talking to the homeless at these cold night shelters and things like that, these homeless shelters, and speaking with the homeless in person and hearing how they're treated by law enforcement and society in general, and watching videos on YouTube and seeing how the homeless are treated by cops, and they're treated like they're not human. They're treated like they're just something that we can pass a law and just get rid of somehow, make them go away and just disappear or something like that.
Sure.
And if we can't, and in the United States, if you can't ask somebody for help, then do we just don't have free speech? And that's just all there is to it.
But Jeff, it's panhandling, right? It's not
Right.
free speech.
Right.
That's what they want you to think, and
Right.
you've challenged that both with various suits, and you actually put your word where your mouth is, and you've taken on this and shown, okay, panhandling's not free speech. Well, officer, can I have some money?
Yeah. When I go out and I hold my cardboard sign, I never ask for money unless a law enforcement officer comes up to me and says that, if we catch you out here, something along the lines usually of, if we heard that you were panhandling because we got a call, and of course, cops like to treat
Soliciting.
yeah, cops like to treat phone calls like it's the gospel truth, and it's it's not hearsay, which is what it is. It's just hearsay.
It's hearsay,
And
right?
we've heard that you're out here begging for money, and if we catch you out here begging for money, we're gonna arrest you and take you to jail. And then I try to explain to him, well, I'm not begging for money. However, if I was, it would still be protected free speech because the courts have ruled on this. The Supreme Courts have ruled on it. State courts have ruled on it. It's well established for decades that it's free speech, and they're still like, well, we're still going to take you to jail. So I'm just like, okay, I'll challenge you. I'll challenge you on that. Officer, can I have some money? Can you help a guy out? And,
I don't think they've ever actually given you any Federal Reserve notes when asking that, but I know for a
no,
fact they've never actually arrested you when you've said that to them. Interestingly enough.
they did. They did in Daytona Beach Shores. When I asked the
Oh,
cops there in
really?
Daytona Beach Shores, they kept telling me, and I was trying to explain. And this is another thing that's infuriating. And um, listening to these cops is officers is constitutionally protected activity protected by the First Amendment. I'm standing on a public sidewalk engaged in freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly on a traditional public forum. And they always respond to that by saying, yeah, but we got an ordinance.
As if that has anything to do with our God-given rights, our unalienable
Right.
rights, right?
And you didn't
Unalienable.
swear
How
an
do you say
oath to
that?
uphold and defend the city ordinances. You swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution.
Sure.
And like you and I both know, a lot of people get it wrong, and I've actually said it incorrectly sometimes. But the Constitution doesn't give us our rights; they are
No.
God-given, inalienable human rights that the Constitution enshrines and protects, or is supposed to protect from dumb cops and the dumb government employees.
Yep, it's natural law if you really want to get deep into it, and that's so true. We were talking about just a moment ago feeding the homeless, and I remember now maybe 10 years ago in Orlando there was a group called Food Not Bombs,
Yep.
and they were actively trying to feed the homeless, and the police were going into a public place where they were feeding the homeless and arresting those that were daring to feed these people. And
Yes.
if that's not a commentary, a caricature of just how far gone our society is, and how using lawfare has gone to a point where now they're arresting people feeding others, I don't know what is a better example
And
of.
why were they arresting them? Because some politicians and local government
Yep.
probably got an earful from a lot of residents that I call meanie pants that think that you can just legislate away homelessness. They passed an ordinance which outlawed feeding the homeless in public without some sort of permit, I'm sure, or something like that. And then what did the cops do? I'm not here to uphold and defend your constitutionally protected rights. I'm here to enforce some ordinance. No matter what it is, I have to do it.
All right, but Jeff, let me hit you with this one.
All right.
They have a job to do, brother. They're just following orders, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what they're doing. Just following
That
orders.
that is one of the downfalls of humanity is those that believe that following orders should trump doing what's right. And at the end of the day, you've been standing up for some time to what's right. So a lot of people watch these First Amendment audits and they say to themselves, well, what's the point of this? Why are people doing this? And there's some good, there's some bad. What's your state of the union, if you will, on the First Amendment audit, where it's headed, some of the things that you like about it, some of the things you don't like about it? I'd love to hear your opinions on the current state of First Amendment auditing, as it's called, which is, as we mentioned earlier, vastly popular, especially on platforms like YouTube. How many subscribers do you have at this point, Jeff?
Just over 300,000 now. That's
Wow,
amazing. Yeah, yeah.
incredible.
Over 300,000 subscribers. I'm almost at 200 million views, which I never imagined that would happen when I first started this. My first videos going back to 2011, I think it was. Yeah, it was on my birthday, January 8th, 2011. My first videos were filming speed traps in the towns of Lottie, Florida, Hampton, Florida, and Waldo,
Yep.
Florida. And
They
I put
actually
those vi-
dismantled that police department in Waldo, Florida for
they
their illegal
there's no
pirates.
the Waldo Police Department no longer exists. They got
Yeah.
busted for ticket quotas, and the chief of police was busted for that. They disbanded the police department there. In Hampton, Florida, where I did a video also, they disbanded the police department there because um, same issues, but even weirder, even more crazy stuff going on. Lottie, Florida is still there, and they're still a speed trap, and hopefully they'll be
Yep.
next.
Fascinating stuff. So we've come a long way since then, and we've seen some positive change.
Oh, and those
What are
views, those. I'm sorry, I'm just the
Sure.
point that those videos when I published them, I was excited after about 6 months when it reached 300 views. One of those videos got to 300 views and like 13 comments. I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah, it's gone a long way since then. You get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of views now on your videos, and there have been some wins. And let's talk a little bit about the evolution of not just your work, but the First Amendment audits as a whole. Where do you think this is heading? What's the good, the bad, the ugly? What are your thoughts?
Well, when you and I were doing this, a decade or more or so ago, and then the guys that were before us, like Jacob Crawford, that was doing the Cop Watch videos.
Yep.
It used to be, and it still happens every once in a while, but if you pointed a camera at a cop, there was a really high probability that you were going to jail.
That's
They,
right.
they, they would always say something along the lines of you're interfering, you're obstructing, some sort of nonsense that they would come up with. And back then, a lot of times the charges would stick, even though there was already well established case law with Smith versus Cumming. But I think now, for the most part, cops know that we have the right to film them and we have the right
That's
to
a win.
document. That's a
That's
win. I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah. And I've been arrested, count 14 times or so. Carlos Miller was arrested a lot of times. You've been arrested for free speech.
I've been arrested. Yep.
And just countless people have been arrested for just pointing a camera at the cops. And these cops, they used to they acted like they were, the secret police or something like that. Like we couldn't film what they were doing. And of course they don't
Sure.
like that because they've had to change their tactics over the years.
So now it's less of the police saying, "Hey, you can't film me," and it's become more of the general public and government officials not realizing that we have a First Amendment right. And a lot of folks that are doing this sort of activism want to talk about exercising those rights and not losing those muscles, if you will. How important is exercising our rights?
Well, I think it's very important, and I think that for example, with the cardboard sign that I hold up that has the message "God bless homeless veterans" on it.
Right.
I mean, you can't think of a more, or I'm sorry, I can't say you can't, but I can't really think of a more benevolent a message that the majority of Americans would agree with is, pray for our homeless vets. God bless our homeless vets. But you still when you go out there and when I go out there and I hold my sign, I have to tell my wife what time I'm getting out there, what time she can expect me to call her. And if you don't hear from me from by this time, I'm probably in jail. I'm in this county. I'll most likely be in this jail. It says a lot. This is nothing new. This is a well established right. Uh, the most cherished
Sure.
right that we have is going out in public and speaking our mind and saying what we want. And even with a benevolent message like that, there's still really a lot of pushback from it. And I'm sorry, I forgot what what was the
Well,
question again?
no, exactly. But what it exposes, oftentimes are mini tyrants, if you will. So it's not just the police that are tyrants. It's not just local government that are tyrants. It's not just the federal government that is filled with tyrants. It's not just the shadow government that's filled with tyrants. It's not just the powers that shouldn't be. It is on the most microscopic of levels where we see in our everyday lives tyrants, people that can't stand your liberties and they want to stand in opposition to that. And you've exposed a number of these tyrants, whether it's your most recent work going to farmers markets, where the local farmers market manager says, this is my market, you're in a public place, and yet they think they have the authority to dictate what you can and cannot do. And they're trying to come up and be in direct opposition of your God-given rights.
Yeah, it's troubling that no matter how small a position of power that somebody has been given, it's just kind of human nature to abuse that. Whether it's the just a park ranger in a public park, getting me trespassed out of the park for saying "God bless homeless vets," or a farmers market manager who thinks for some reason that just because they have a farmers market there, that suddenly all of a sudden they own the public park and they can completely control with dictatorial authority what happens in the public park. It's just it's pretty troubling how human nature is overall. Or even a security guard or somebody that's a homeowners association, if they see something they don't like, that's it's just kind of become the American pastime to call the cops. And what are you calling the cops for? Because you're not doing what I'm asking you to do. And it's like,
Yeah.
think about what you're saying. You're calling the cops because I'm politely declining to do what you're telling me to do. Another two grown men, two adults, or two, adults, and
So
you're going to call
because
the
you're not
cops.
doing what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to threaten you with armed men that could potentially shoot you and use violence towards you or put you in a cage.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of micro tyranny that I'm talking about. I faced this with a neighbor of mine. I was dealing with a neighbor who didn't like my Second Amendment rights, and I posted that encounter on my YouTube channel, where law enforcement actually stood up for our rights. And I would like to think that the sheriff's office, if led correctly, is that final check in our system of checks and balances to stand up for their oath to the Constitution. And a good constitutional sheriff will tell you that their job is to protect our rights, even if the federal government is tyrannical and trying to impose itself. A good
Hmm.
local sheriff, if they're constitutional, will say, heck no, get out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's supposed to be their job.
A lot of people think you're in opposition to law enforcement, and you're not necessarily. But you certainly are exposing what needs to be exposed. And now it's funny. I watch your videos, Jeff, and just today you released the body cam footage of one of your encounters, and the law enforcement officer was talking about, oh yeah, that's Jeff Gray. We know him. He's cool. He's. I've always had good interactions with him, and so now you've got a reputation where it seems that to a certain extent those guys actually do respect you, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I do believe they respect what I do. I do believe that they know enough to know that I don't break the law, that I don't do anything illegal. Um,
Right.
so they know not to, for lack of a better way of saying it, not to mess with me. However, if you also in the video that I released today that you're talking about, the cop was telling the people that had called the police on me for standing on a public sidewalk holding a sign that says "God bless homeless veterans," that the only reason he does this is the only reason he does this is to try to sue us. He wants a lawsuit, and that's the only reason he does it. He just wants a lawsuit, and that's a little bit frustrating to hear too. That even still to this day, there's a lot of cops that
Sure.
say that, and it's not just there was another body cam video just I put out a few days ago. That another cop saying the same. All he does is he wants a lawsuit. He wants a lawsuit, and that's frustrating. It's sad that it's hard to figure out if they really believe that or if they know better and they just say that to people. It's hard to tell which one that is, but
Yeah,
um,
the other thing they like to say when they think we're not watching, and now with body cam footage, we get to capture a lot of this.
our
But they
body
like to
cam's
say,
awesome.
yeah, they are great, and it's unfathomable that some agencies still don't have them, and that's another story. And also in the state of Florida, something you and I have talked about. Uh, Law enforcement has the ability to turn off their body cam when having certain private conferences
Yeah,
amongst
or
their
muting it. Yeah,
yeah, and I think that ought to be illegal. I think that shows that they're trying to hide something, which is horrible. But one of the things they often say when they think nobody's watching and they're talking to somebody who's a complainant, they say, "Unfortunately, Jeff has the right to do what he's doing," or
yeah,
whomever. And I hate that because I don't think they realize it necessarily, but what's unfortunate about the very foundation of our rights, the right to free speech, the right to the press, the right to assemble, these are core fundamental concepts that I'd like to think we were all taught, and that regardless if you were taught them, that you would respect and appreciate.
right. And if another thing that I like to say is, unfortunately, like you said, unfortunately has the right to do that, or he or she is baiting us or trying to trick us into violating their rights. Well, when you're doing something like as core, basic, fundamental, cherished right as standing on a public sidewalk holding a sign, saying something as peaceful and benevolent as "God bless our homeless veterans," I would personally be ashamed to suggest that somebody is baiting me for something like that. It would be something that I would be too ashamed to say because it would be embarrassing. That you would be implying that you're that dumb or you're that gullible or you're easily triggered enough to be baited by somebody that's doing something that's a well-established right. This is nothing new.
Sure.
This is going way back hundreds and hundreds of years. Before even America was even founded. In Great Britain, they had what was it, the Magna Carta or whatever, when they
Right.
free speech. This is nothing new, man. So if I'm tricking you or baiting you with something that's so well established, I don't know what to do for you. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
It's funny how people can think that somehow this is anything but uh, our at the foundation of our rights. Jeff, what are some of the and I know you have so many of them, but what are some of the instances that stand out to you as having been the most egregious confrontations that you've had? And you've won a number of lawsuits, not because you actively want to sue, but because unfortunately you've had outlandish violations of your rights that you need to make an example of. And oftentimes, when you did sue, you weren't suing for money; you were suing for the principle, which I admire.
yeah, thank you. And the other thing is, going back to the whole baiting, or he's trying to get us for a lawsuit, is if you look at my videos, the ones that are most popular videos by far and away, with 4 million views, my most popular video is a positive interaction, a positive encounter with law enforcement where they
There you
did the
go.
right thing. So if all I want to do is bait you or trick you into violating my rights, then why do I always post and publish whether it was a good interaction or a bad interaction?
Right.
But I would say definitely the most egregious arrest was definitely Flagler Beach, where I was just
Yeah.
arrested there in front of the Funky Pelican, standing on a public sidewalk, which really blew me away. I really didn't expect to get arrested that day
So,
at
so
all.
let's walk people through that arrest. And a number of things stood out to me, including them forcibly shoving you into the back of a cop car. You're a big guy. They're shoving you in there in just an inhumane way. But what led up to that moment where they made such an egregious assault on you?
Well, I was doing what I always do. I'm standing out on a public sidewalk at a busy crosswalk where there was a lot of foot traffic as well as vehicular traffic, which gave me the opportunity to spread the message of God bless homeless veterans many people as I possibly could. And there was a restaurant there, Funky Pelican, and the people from the Funky Pelican came out and tried to run me off when I politely refused and stood my ground, said, I'm not going anywhere. I have a right to be here. They called the police on me, and two officers showed up, a younger guy, a rookie, Officer Luttrell. He showed up first, and he actually went inside and talked to him. And if you watch the body cam video, you can hear him say he's not breaking any laws, he's not doing anything wrong, so we really can't do anything about it. And then he comes back out to talk to me just to try to ask me if I would just go somewhere else. I can't tell you to go somewhere else. But then his sergeant shows up, Sergeant Yelvington, and just immediately escalates the situation and threatens me with arrest and says, I can trespass you from a sidewalk. We do it all the time. And when I stood my ground and said I'm not leaving, they arrested me. And it was the reason it was so egregious was quite a few things. Is that Sergeant Yelvington was a real jackass. He had a lot of real bad attitude. Of course, it was a violation of my rights. They threw my sign away, my cardboard sign. Sergeant Yelvington just took it and threw it in the trash. Uh, the way they unnecessarily, Sergeant Yelvington shoved me into the back of the car, bending my neck over, hurting my shoulder and my neck, and they charged me with a felony. Here you
Right.
have free speech on the public sidewalk uh, being converted into a felony.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
and then when
was
then when you get to the jail, that they actually took because a lot of times when I get arrested, I get released before I actually go to the jail because somebody calls them and says, "Hey, you just screwed up." But this time I actually went. They took me to the Flagler County Jail, and I had to be strip searched. I had to do the whole thing. I had to bend over and cough, and let some strange dude, look up my butt, and very, very humiliating. Very just a horrible way to be treated, guilty until you prove yourself innocent. Only for them the very next day, basically to drop all the charges against me. So that was definitely the
sure.
worst one. Another one was the one if anybody watches my videos, you know which one I'm talking about. Little Rock, Arkansas. That was really a particularly egregious one, just because of the attitude the officers had there. And being in front of City Hall on the steps of City Hall, which is really a very, very traditional public forum. There's been quite a few bad ones. The one where in Brevard County back in 2013 when I was arrested there, and the cops were threatening to arrest my wife and take my daughter and put her in juvenile hall and laughing and saying you'll probably never get your daughter back. Ha 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 ha.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
yeah, it's been quite the journey. It's been quite the journey. Of course,
Yeah.
I've never been convicted of anything out of 13, 14 arrests. All the charges always got dropped.
Fascinating, having been arrested that many times, and I'm in the same boat. The times that I've been arrested for free speech and my activism, they're always dropped, but nonetheless, you still do suffer quite a bit, and that dehumanizing experience that you went through is inexcusable. Jeff, and by the way, if you're just joining us, we're on with Jeff Gray. Honor Your Oath is his YouTube channel. The man really needs no introduction, but nonetheless, he is with us tonight on the Bob Tuskin Show to talk about a number of things. And we're going to get to the flock cameras because it's a fascinating look at this Orwellian state that we're living in. And Jeff recently published a video about the flock cameras being installed in his neck of the woods. But Jeff, for those that are listening right now who don't know who Officer Joffrion is, who is Officer Joffrion?
Yes, Officer Sergeant Joffrion is a sergeant and a field training officer with the Waveland, Mississippi Police Department, who I had an encounter with, and he trespassed me from public property, telling me never to come back. Said such amazing things as we're not a free will state here in Mississippi. If you don't like it, take your butt back to Florida.
We're not. No, let's emphasize that quote one more time. Quote: We're not a free. This isn't a free will state, is what he said, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, and if you don't like it, go back to Florida. And when I said, but sir, I'm trying to explain to you, Sergeant Joffrey, I'm trying to explain to you that I'm engaged in a constitutionally protected activity safeguarded by the First Amendment. This is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly on a traditional public forum. I literally don't care, was his response to that. Mister, don't literally don't care.
I don't care, and
Yeah.
The irony.
You're gonna
Was
go
he
to jail,
not
no questions
was he a
asked.
veteran, or I believe
Yeah,
he
he's an
was.
Air Force veteran. Yeah, he had the whole. He's an Air Force veteran. He had the whole, I believe, "We the People" Constitution tattoo on his arm. All that stuff. Yeah. So the biggest problems sadly, the biggest problems that I've had with people calling in on me or people arresting me is most of them have been veterans. So
Wow. Yeah, the hypocrisy there, and a disproportionate amount of veterans are homeless, unfortunately, and it's just a horrible thing. And your sign, "God bless the homeless veterans," that's being picked on so often, is such a great message in and of itself. But to show and expose what happens to somebody going out with what ought to be a fairly innocuous sort of message, a benevolent message of "God bless the homeless veterans," and to see the vitriol that you face from people for simply voicing that message is horrendous. And I want to thank you for everything that you do. Jeff, we
And
have a
I wanted to be clear on that too. Is
sure.
the majority of the people that I interact with the majority of them are kind, good-hearted people who want to try to help me out. When I
Yep,
explain to them what I'm doing, when they try to give me money and I don't take it, they're very kind about it. Good-hearted, kind people. But unfortunately, it's the minority that are the meanie pants, is what I call them.
yeah,
That make the biggest noise and call the cops. And for some reason, cops, we've discussed this before. And this is the biggest. And let me address this real quick. With law enforcement, I'm addressing you directly, cops that are listening to this. Just because you got a phone call, just because dispatch radio or relayed that phone call to you, that phone call does not equal martial law being declared and a suspension of our constitutionally protected rights. That's all you got is a phone call. And I can understand if you're going to a situation where there's shots fired or some sort of violence going on, so you have to get control of the situation.
sure,
But if you're getting a call about something about a guy holding a sign or some other kind of situation where you can go to the scene, you can actually do an investigation, do an
right,
actual investigation. Don't just go there and demand ID and take the gospel truth of like the phone calls the gospel truth and trespass somebody or arrest somebody just because what somebody
sure,
said on the phone. Go there, do an actual investigation, listen to what's actually being said to you,
right.
and set your ego aside and enforce the law instead of your ego.
Well,
Do a
we know for
proper
a fact
investigation.
that hearsay is not enforceable or probable cause. And furthermore, it shouldn't be, because we've seen time and time again where witnesses, they just get it wrong. They claim they saw this or that, and your videos have exposed this time and time again, where people assume that because you're holding a sign, and it's a cardboard sign, and you do that, of course, to make it look a certain way, they assume, making an asset of you and me, that you're begging for money. And even if you were, we've talked about it, that's free speech. But nonetheless, they're making false accusations
Yep.
based on a presumption of theirs. And witnesses, not only in the scenario that we just described, where you've highlighted it in your videos, but witnesses have gotten it wrong so many times. And there's been tons of studies that show, if you ask someone, okay, so what did they look like? Okay, so what did they say? It's the game of telephone. It
Right.
starts to get more and more obfuscated as it goes down the pipe. And it certainly is a good testament of just how important a proper investigation, using critical thinking, using true research, and I guess in the case of law enforcement, detective work, it shows how important it is, because oftentimes people do get it wrong. They don't get it right.
Right.
They're mistaken. They're confused, or so on and so
And by the
forth.
time it gets to the actual law enforcement officer, it's like third party hearsay. I guess I would say, because you've
Right.
got the caller. If you watch my videos and you listen to the phone calls, they never can get. I don't think I've ever heard a single caller say correctly what my sign actually says. My sign has "God bless homeless veterans" written on it, but when the caller says, the sign says "Give me money, I'm homeless," is what they'll say. Or
Right.
by the time it gets to cop, for like example, when I was arrested in Mount Dora, the librarian that called said that I would. They didn't want me trespassed. They didn't want me arrested or anything like that. They just wanted the police to come here and explain to me why I can't stand on a public sidewalk and hold a sign. But by the time the dispatcher relayed that to the police, the dispatcher actually said he's been asked to leave multiple times and he's
Right.
refusing to do so.
Was never
So,
said. But
yeah,
yet,
right,
in
correctly,
the game of
correct.
telephone, it continues to get slanted, and it's often
Yep.
exposing the bias of either the dispatcher or the officer or the caller or the person that told the person to call. Because sometimes it's not even the caller. Sometimes it's, hey, Sheila, do me a favor. Call the cops on that guy outside holding the sign. Now Sheila's on the phone saying, yeah, I'm calling the cops because my coworker told me to call you.
Uh huh.
Yeah, this guy's doing this or that. So now you got 4 layers of bias and hearsay that gets changed as it goes on and on and on. Interesting
Right, right.
stuff.
And stop and to you also to you cops, kick the ID crack habit. Quit, kick your addiction for ID. When you get on a scene and the first thing you demand from somebody is their ID. My identification is not going to tell you whether there's criminal activity afoot. My ID is not going to tell you what's been going on around here for the last 20 minutes. Okay, here's an idea. If you get a call about guy holding a sign and he's begging for money, why don't you just park down the street where you can see me and observe me for a little bit and watch
Sure,
what I'm actually doing
that'd be
instead of
smart.
showing up on the scene saying, we got a call says you're doing this, so therefore that means you're doing this, and give me your ID or you're going to jail.
Well,
Knock it off.
that's a great segue to the flock cameras, perhaps. But
Uh huh.
before we get to that, and I'm gonna continue to tease that just a little bit longer. I want to mention that we may take a few calls um, at the end of the show. So if you do want to call and talk to Jeff, we'll take maybe 1 or 2 calls. So now's your chance to get on the board. 1-800-313-9443, 800
Cool.
313 9443. And I say that because we do have somebody listening on YouTube that wanted to ask you, Jeff, do you remember Mount Hope, West Virginia? The lady who dealt with you was recently charged with embezzlement from that town. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember seeing that article. I sure do. Uh huh.
Interesting. So, these people that you come across are often criminals, yet they're calling on you, and that always seems to be the case. Those that point the finger have what's the saying? Several pointing back at them.
That's right. That's right. And I got a public records request from the Jacksonville State Attorney's Office about it was a list of Brady cops. I was looking through the list. And I was, I wonder how many of these cops are on the Brady list that have actually encountered in public. And sure enough, 2 or 3 of them are on that I've dealt with in the public on video are on the Brady list. So you never know who you're dealing with these
This is
cops,
so
these
true.
public officials.
The Lieutenant Lalonde, who arrested me for showing people the footage of Building 7, I put that on my YouTube channel years ago. When I started to look into this guy that just arrested me for free speech and showing people the smoking gun of 9/11, perhaps, I looked into him, and Lalonde had been sued multiple times. In addition to being sued multiple times, he had actually shot and killed someone. Okay, this is
Mm.
the guy who arrested me.
Yeah, I
And when
remember
you look
that.
into him and you find all of this rap sheet on him, it makes you wonder. And sometimes, we ought to be in fear for our safety doing this sort of activism. Have there been times where you've been genuinely afraid for your safety? I know you're a secure guy, but I would imagine there have been.
I was in fear for my safety with Joffrey.
Yeah.
When I handed him my ID after he threatened to arrest me multiple times, I finally gave up my ID, and I saw him holding it in his hand, and his hand was trembling, like shaking, and that really that scared me. And also, I quit doing the open carry. I don't remember if you remember years ago, I was doing the open carry of the Second Amendment auditing, and I quit doing that because I found out through public records requests that they were basically setting me up to get shot, distributing completely false narratives and flat out lies through the Department of Homeland Security and the Florida Fusion Center. just complete flat out lies about who I am and what I do. And I quit doing the open carry tests, which that's changed now because it's completely legal.
Right.
But it was different
But
back then. You could open carry when you were fishing, hunting, or camping.
sure. And you have the armed fisherman, a colleague of yours, who was famous for continuing to do that. And geez, he dealt with so much. He was just arrested recently, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's got some bogus, basically stalking charges that they put against him because he was going to public meetings in Clearwater, Florida, and he gave one of
Sure.
the public officials there, a female public official, a box of chocolates, and made a comment about how nice her booty is, and he's now
Okay,
been
well,
arrested for that,
not
basically.
maybe not the most polite thing to say, but certainly not an arrestable offense. And the old liberals, the word coming from liberation or libertarian, or the root of that word, used to say, "I might not agree with what you're saying, but I agree with your right to say it."
Absolutely, and that's something that I wish more Americans understood.
Absolutely. Jeff, we're going to get to the flock cameras again. If you want to touch base with Jeff, we might open up the phone lines for a couple quick calls towards the end on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Thank you to the producers there for helping make this show a reality. And that troll-free number to join us is 800-313-9443. But Jeff, let's get to these cameras, these flock cameras. They're popping up just about everywhere. I have a friend in Georgia who told me about one outside of his very rural street in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. The cameras are looking to create a vehicular fingerprint. They capture your license plate, car make and model, color, and other unique features of the car. But unlike traditional CCTV, Flock creates a searchable database of innocent people's movements. So it indiscriminately, without a warrant, is tracking people. And of course, the Flock technology was created through a Israeli company, I believe, but it's been utilized here in a number of different ways that seem to be just a further erosion on our privacy. Tell me a little bit more about your take on these flock cameras popping up, and we'll talk a little bit about your recent video where you encountered an installer who claims to have been former law enforcement, by the way.
Right, which I totally believe,
Yeah,
based on the way he was acting, trying to order somebody around where he had no authority to do so. But the flock cameras in general, the whole system that they're setting up, they're not trying to set up. I've ones that I've noticed within 6 miles of my house. There's probably about 6 or 7 of them within 6 miles of my house. Basically, can't go anywhere in the county, the county that I live in, without of 2 or 3 flock cameras tracking what I'm doing. And I just want to address. There was somebody that brought up in one of the comments about. They said, "Well, you're being a hypocrite because there's no expectation of privacy in public, and that's what you auditors talk about all the time. But you're whining and crying about the government tracking what you do." And uh, for me, there's such an obvious distinction between that. It doesn't even seem like it needs to be explained, but just because we have no expectation of privacy in public doesn't mean that the public has to put up with the government surveilling and tracking everything we do. And I am absolutely 100% against these flock cameras. And I think we need to all stand together and get them removed. It's not acceptable to me as a free American, as a free citizen, as a free person.
sure. And it's one of many different examples. It's not by any stretch of the imagination unique. I mean, our smartphones and computers and all of these things, even the library books that we take out.
Yeah.
I remember,
Right.
I remember after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, it was exposed that your library books were being monitored by the powers that shouldn't be. The
Right.
NSA has a strong grip on our everyday interactions. And, we got guys like Snowden and others who have exposed this. I think a lot of people, though, Jeff, are just kind of, I don't know, apathetic to it all. They're like, they do it. So what? I got nothing to hide. Remember, we used to hear that a lot. I got nothing to hide.
So I'm not worried
So
about it. Yeah.
I'm not worried about it. Why is that a
Nice.
misnomer?
Well, because if you have nothing to hide, first of all, then why do we have these surveillance uh, apparatus out there? And also, the people that are innocent are the ones that the Fifth Amendment is really designed for, a right to be not self-incriminate, because
Right.
there's already dozens and dozens of examples of innocent people falsely being accused of doing things they didn't do, just because these flock cameras have tracked them going about their daily lives driving through communities. There's the infamous case of the officer showing up at this lady's front door and saying, "We have proof that you're the ones that's been stealing these packages. You're a porch pirate, because the flock camera evidence shows that you are." And thankfully, she had her own dash cams and stuff to show that she had to prove her innocence against this cop that was accusing her of doing something she didn't do, based on flock surveillance. And it just any kind of bad human behavior that already exists it's just going to be applied to this technology, and it's already
Sure.
happening. We have police chiefs and law enforcement officers who are stalking people and harassing people, looking at uh, girls, male officers
Yeah.
harassing and stalking females, because they can do this now through these flock cameras. We have political incumbents, mayors or whatever, that are harassing their opponents in political races. This is stuff that's already going on and happening, and it's being abused by these cameras, and they're just bad news. They're just bad news.
All right, Jeff. So what are we going to do to stop it? How are we going to stand up? What are we going to do? You want to get together and hold signs? What are we doing?
Well, I think we can keep raising awareness about it and letting people know. Like you said, there's a lot of people that are. I can't say there's most people, because I was out there holding a sign a week ago that said "fuck flock cameras," and a lot of the people were very supportive of it, honking their horns, giving me thumbs up, and saying, screaming out the window, "Yeah, fuck those cameras." Um, so I think there's already a pretty strong public backlash against these cameras, and if we can keep exposing them and talking about them and putting videos out there and exposing the hypocrisy of a flock camera employee installing a camera and then getting mad because I was filming his vehicle, I think we can get them taken down. There's people have rebelled against the red light cameras and the speed cameras, and have gotten them removed. So we can do the
Sure.
same with these flock cameras.
All right, Jeff Gray is our guest tonight. Honor Your Oath, the YouTube channel. Jeff, I want to squeeze in a couple quick calls and kind of wrap things up. And we're going to go to Mitchell in Tennessee here in just a second. But one of the things that came to mind when you mentioned filming is, oftentimes First Amendment auditors and others will go into a place and they're told, you don't need to film. We have cameras here. Or they'll point out the hypocrisy of the fact that they're told that they can't film, yet the building has security cameras everywhere they look. And we've seen it time and time again, especially like we mentioned before, how body cameras can be muted by officers in the state of Florida. We can't depend on their cameras. We need to have our own for an independent record, and everyone should be fond of that. Everyone should want that for transparency and accountability purposes. No?
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with a government employee, I think it's very wise for you to record every you know every transaction that you have with them. As So you should always be recording. Should always document what's being said between you and the government employee, as long as you're in a legal place to do it. I'm not suggesting anybody do anything illegal, but as long as you're in a public space and there's no expectation of privacy, you should record the interaction you're having with that public employee, because you
Yeah.
never know, it could protect you from false accusations and keep you from being falsely convicted of a crime that you didn't commit.
I totally agree. All right, let's talk to Mitchell in Tennessee. Mitchell, you're on the Bob Tuskin Show. with Jeff Gray. What's up?
Bob, Jeff, what's going on?
Hey,
How are
Mitchell,
you?
how are you?
Bob, welcome back. Listen,
Thanks, man.
we understand that there's no expectation of privacy in public. However, we as individuals could have an expectation not to be stalked. So
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
I think that the flock cameras I think we're talking about stalking. That's maybe a better way to couch that. I want to go to two things real quick that you were talking about, the Brady list, and I think it's also there's one called the Giglio list. It's the same thing,
Yes.
but it's just an observation. The Brady list. So the police officer is caught lying, a known liar, and they keep this guy on the force, and they put him on this list, right? And so they say, well, you really, there's cases where we can't allow you to testify in court, which normally would be part of your job. We can't let you do that because you're a liar. But then they tell the guy, but you can go out in the field and in your police cruiser and write police reports.
Right.
Just think about that. You can write police reports and jam people up and lie about, and they're lying on those reports constantly. There's all these channels of following the police, and it's a huge growing almost industry of people doing these police audit channels, and it's amazing how much misconduct is going on out there.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to, the fact that there's
Sure.
even something that's called a Brady Giglio list is a glaring example of how far gone law enforcement is in America, because there should be no such thing as that unless it was just a list to keep them from ever being cops again. There shouldn't be a list
That's a beautiful point. It's
Yeah.
the same with the gypsy cops. They arrange it to where they can do these horrible things, and then they arrange it where they can still keep their certification and go somewhere else and continue to be a cop. But the thing about it, you're right. The question is, if someone steals money from the till of a restaurant, you would get rid of them, right?
Absolutely.
You would fire them. But then
Yeah, and the next restaurant would not hire them, of course.
Exactly. There'd be a record of that behavior, and then
Right.
it's. I would urge people to start looking at some of these videos. Lackluster, James Freeman, We the People University. That guy was a former cop.
civil rights lawyer. Yeah.
Civil rights lawyer, yeah.
Audit Archive. There's all of these channels you can go to, and you can watch this stuff. And I guarantee you, if people spend some time and start watching it with the civil trial lawyer. If you
Civil
watch
rights,
these
yeah.
videos and you spend some time and take it upon yourself to take some time and watch these, I guarantee you, you're going to come around and you're going to say, wait a minute, this is problematic and this needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Mitchell, thank you for the call. Jeff, he mentioned a lot of great work. You've been at it for just about as long as anyone. And I really appreciate everything that you do, man. I got to tell you, I'm a big supporter of yours, and I can't thank you enough for,
like I said,
for
you
standing
and I
up.
go back a while, and then one of the first things I saw with you was you standing out there at the University of Florida, exercising your right to free speech, raising awareness about World Trade Center Building 7, and you, they violated your rights as clear as they could.
Yeah, they sure did, man. Well, Jeff, we'll have to do this some more. I think people are interested in this. They watch the videos on YouTube, but they don't hear some of the background, and I think we should do this often. So anytime you want to come on, you let me know, brother. We'll do it. We'll get the word out. We'll expose whatever thug we need to expose, and we'll continue fighting the good fight.
Yep. Record the police, record every interaction you have with the police, and start standing up for your rights, people. We got to stand up for our rights. There's nothing wrong with it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually the opposite of that. It's something that we should all do. And, we need to turn the tables, on these police officers and these traffic stops, and let them know that we have rights and we can stand up for our rights, and it's a good thing.
It's a great thing. All right, Jeff, take care. Enjoy the rest of
Bob.
your evening.
Good talking to you, man.
Yeah, man. All righty. This has been another edition of the Bob Tuskin Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys for listening and supporting my new endeavor here, or my old endeavor that's coming back. We'll see you guys next week, Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. And, of course, you can always listen to us on the Republic Broadcasting Archives or on YouTube or my Facebook page or wherever you might want to find me. So thank you so much for tuning in. Love you guys. Take care and have a great night.